Today I am joined with Wichita State alumni, talk show host, Campus Connect, and Varsity Kansas reporter, Aliyah Funshcelle. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
So first off, before we get into any sports questions, how have you been and how have you adjusted to quarantine life as a sports reporter?
Well, I've been pretty good. I've been actually working more hours at my job at the food bank. So for a while there, when everything was shut down, I was still working full time there and not really as involved with the sports world, which wasn't fun, but also
Mhm.
sports wasn't happening.
Right.
But then recently I've been reporting on my like on different teams and like my I guess now old school, but I've been reporting on that and then also having people on my talk show. So it's picked back up. So I'm very thankful for that because I was not very happy without the sports. So
I think
yeah.
a lot of us in the business weren't excited with, everything going on that we didn't know really what to talk about. And, we were kind of bringing up old games, old memories, but there's nothing new to really talk about. We were just really reminiscing on the past.
Yeah, I definitely was doing that too. I was just like honestly talking about anything at that point.
Yeah. So you've interviewed some great athletes I've saw, and like Russell Westbrook, Trey Young, and his Cantor. Who was your favorite one to really interview?
So, okay, so I would have to say definitely Ennis Cantor because he is like the funniest person in the world, but he's also so sweet.
Hmm.
And I actually have to give credit to the Knicks because, well, first of all, I'm a lifelong Knicks fan, which isn't very fun.
Sorry.
Um, but I was actually interviewing Ron Baker because he was the Knicks at the time and a Wichita State alumni. And the Knicks, we were in the locker room and they're at Oklahoma City. And the Knicks organization, they're just like, yeah, like if there's anyone else you want to interview, like go right ahead, just walk right up to them. And I was like, are you kidding? So I went up to Ennis Cantor and he was just like so nice. We asked him like random questions and I asked him about Ron, but he was super sweet. So he's definitely my favorite.
He seems like a really nice guy to talk to as well. He seems very personable. And one guy who may not always seem as personable, it seems like Russell Westbrook, definitely a hard guy to interview. You see some of the things and the responses he's given to media members. What was it like knowing that you could kind of get that reaction from him?
Yeah, so with his, it wasn't a one-on-one, but I actually did meet him one-on-one and I introduced myself and shook his hand. But like I've actually been in now two press conferences. Well, it's actually not like a press conference, it's all in the locker room and then you're all just in a little
Hmm.
cluster. But he was super sweet. From that, like he actually like the two ones that I've been in, he didn't say anything crazy. He was in a very good mood. So I didn't experience that. He was way more intimidating and hard to approach than other athletes because he does give off that, vibe,
Right.
and he does have that reputation, and he has been pretty not rude, but just like unapproachable. But thankfully, my experience with him isn't bad.
That's good. I mean, definitely now you can't get in those clusters in the locker rooms anymore asking athletes questions and kind of doing it this way. Have you had like any experience kind of doing kind of a Zoom interview with any athletes?
So I've done a lot of Instagram lives,
Hmm.
and that's really honestly kind of scary. I haven't done any Zoom interviews, and I actually want to start getting into that because obviously you can cut it if you need to,
Right.
or if something goes wrong, they can restate it. So that's something I want to get into. But no, I've been doing some Instagram lives, and those make my heart just like patter so much.
Yeah, I like Instagram Live. It can definitely be hard because you don't know what you're gonna get, and you don't know also what the comments down below, what people are gonna say. So it's kind of like nerve-wracking. You kind of want to be like as perfect as you possibly can, especially with an athlete.
Yes, definitely. That's the comments too, are what scares me as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm with you there with the comments because you just who knows who's gonna come on and say whatever.
Yeah.
So you are a female in sports. What is something that you would say to young girls who aspire to be in your position?
Yeah, so inspiring younger girls is actually something that I've tried to build my platform on,
Hmm.
and it's something I've been very passionate about. So I do a lot of mentoring, even though I'm really young myself. I'm only 22, but I've done a lot of mentoring so far, And I think the biggest thing is just being persistent because there's going to be so many people that tell you no or tell you that you can't do it. And at times you want to believe them because it does feel like it's impossible or that it's a lot harder for you. So I think persistence is the biggest and the best quality that you can have as a woman in sports. And it's just to be resilient and persistent and just not really take no for an answer is what's important. So that's definitely something that is the very first thing that I
Mhm.
point out to other girls wanting to pursue this.
And it's great that you're doing that because you're using your platform to build the community. And everybody these days, in the last few months, has been using their platform to speak up and to try to bring a message to a group of people. What is your message for women in sports?
Yeah, it's so hard because it's like so hard to paraphrase
Mhm.
everything, but I just think that one, for younger girls that have been seeing the news lately about everything that's happened with Washington and then people coming forward with their stories. I mean, it sounds scary and it can be, but I don't want that to make younger girls not want to pursue a career in
Mhm.
sports. And I think that women in sports are just so strong and they bring so much to the table that we are definitely a force to be reckoned with. And I think that my message to other girls that want to be in the industry or women already in the sports world is not to really try to stray away from who you are as a person to fit what they think you should be, because a lot of people classify women in sports as either super manly and tough and mean, or they're just super airheaded and only there to look pretty and talk to the athletes. And something that I've, you know, dealt with is I'm very bubbly and outgoing and charismatic, and people mistake that for weakness and think that because I am those things that I can't be smart, knowledgeable in sports and that I can be walked all over. When in reality, you can be both. You can have that fun and outgoing personality and not be airheaded and actually know what you're talking about and
Mhm.
be very bold and strong. So that's definitely something that I try to get across to people, is that you don't have to compromise who you are and what you like to do and what you like to wear, how you like to present yourself in order to fit a certain mold of what people think women in sports are supposed to be like.
That's absolutely amazing that you're doing that. And it's a great thing to do because, this job is very demanding and it's very hard. So, really trying to get women into there is really important to grow and help them out, which is honestly, thank you for doing that. It's a great thing to do.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. You're very welcome. Because I have sisters who play sports and, I know what it's like for them and they tell me about it. So, what you're doing is amazing and really helping out a lot of people.
Oh, I'm glad. That's always the goal.
Yeah. So you covered the American Conference with Campus Connect. So now that UConn is in the Big East, how do you think this will all shape out?
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that's going to shape out, because they haven't really had the strongest. I mean, they're very obviously the programs all the way around are very reputable, but lately they haven't really been on top of the
Hmm.
AAC rankings. I've graduated, so I'm like, okay, like I need to start focusing on the Ivy League, even though like their sports definitely aren't as good as the AAC.
Yeah, and you just mentioned the Ivy League and how they canceled their fall sports. So what do you think, should be the go-to for conferences regarding fall sports?
Well, the thing I would like to point out is everyone thought that the Ivy League was crazy for canceling their
Hmm.
conference basketball tournaments. And then, as we have seen, literally a day and a half later, everyone else followed in their
Right.
footsteps. And so, a lot of people like to bring up, oh, well, the Ivy League does not need sports. Like all of these other schools, they do need sports. And well, first of all, the Ivy League isn't canceling their sports, they're just postponing them.
Hmm.
And yes, they don't rely on sports to get that publicity and money, but at the same time, they know it's best. And I've already seen other conferences kind of follow suit with that.
Right.
Um, and I don't know, like, I do think it's smart. Like, it's a good alternative to just narrow down the season just to conference play, which I've
Mm.
seen some of the bigger football schools
Right.
do. But you also have to think about the expenses of even doing that and the consequences that could happen. So I honestly think that it's best, which actually, I don't really know what's best, and I really feel bad for the people who have to make these decisions.
Yeah,
But
it's tough.
I mean, waiting till the spring sounds like a better idea at the moment,
Hmm.
because even if you are shortening who you're playing against and just to your league, I mean, you still have to think of all of the travel expenses and all the testing expenses and
Right.
everything like that. Just because you're playing less people, I mean, the exposure doesn't go down. And then I feel like every campus has their own um, guidelines with COVID.
Hmm.
So that it's just, there's so much gray area that it's like, how are we going to be able to pull this off? So I don't know. I feel like the Ivy League has definitely been made fun of for the stuff they've done regarding
Hmm.
sports, but then as we've seen, people like to follow in their lead after a
Yeah.
while.
And
So
what's so fun about the Ivy League? I love watching it every year. Is Yale and Harvard. Like that's probably one of the my favorite games, just because it has a lot of history behind it. With the two schools, but you know, I think it's just a great game to watch between the two teams.
I definitely agree. And then obviously I've kept up with Columbia basketball. I mean, they
Mm.
weren't great last
Yeah.
year, but for some reason, like Hard always seems to bring out the best in people, and the most competitive games that I've watched have been against Harvard, regardless of who's on the other
Hmm.
side. So I wonder if it's just because Harvard is the most well-known name in
True.
schools. People think Ivy League, they immediately think Harvard. So I don't know if that's why, like, it brings out even more competition. But whoever plays against Harvard seems to have really good and competitive games.
I mean, I'm from Connecticut, so I'm a Yale guy. So, I mean, when I think of
Yeah.
Ivy League schools, I think of Yale first before Harvard. But I mean, I've been on
Hmm.
that Harvard campus before. It was a really nice place to be, but I can really see why that brings out the competitiveness in other teams because, you're going to play against one of the top schools in the world. So, you know, being able to say I beat Harvard is pretty good.
I think that living in the Midwest, like, people don't really know any of the East Coast schools or
Hmm.
who all are in the Ivy League. So everyone just here automatically thinks Harvard, and it's crazy. So
Yeah, it's unique to kind of see like different perspectives of like different regions of what they think of Ivy League schools because I think that term could be a little broad at some points. Like you don't know if a school is Ivy League. Like Brown, that's an Ivy League school I know, and then so like it's just kind of difficult to understand like what school is Ivy League and what school isn't.
yeah, yeah. And there's so many schools in that area. So
There are. So, kind of going back to talking about the Ivy League and the conferences and what they should do, if there are winter sports for, say, like college basketball, do you see fans being in attendance at all, or do you even see a season happening?
I would really like to see a season happen, and I'm very optimistic with the
Mhm.
season because of things that not only the NBA but the TBT, the basketball tournament that happened a few
Right.
weeks ago, they've seen a lot of success because basketball really isn't that hard of a sport to contain compared to football because there's way less people,
Hmm.
like way less players and way less personnel as well. So I can see the season happening, but at the same time, it's just so hard because you can't have a bubble like the NBA or the
Right.
TBT had. So thinking of different players going to different campuses, it's a little iffy, but I am very optimistic that there will be a season. Fans being in attendance that's where I'm like, I don't know. I
Right.
know that Wichita State, we usually have 10,000 plus
Hmm.
people in the stands, and that's crazy. And so I think that they were thinking if there were fans, we might move locations to Intrust Bank Arena, which is our big, it's where all the headlining concerts
Hmm.
go. And it's a lot bigger of a venue, so thered be more room for social distancing. But
Right.
still, there's going to be about 10,000 people that want to go, and that they can't make that happen. So
Yeah.
it will be interesting. I hope that they can somehow have fans in there. I just hope the season can go on. I can honestly see that non-conference schedule not really happening, or Wichita State plays like in the different tournaments like in Maui or
Hmm.
Cancun, so I can see those being scratched. So
Right.
I just hope we can get some college basketball.
No, I agree. I'm a big college basketball guy myself, so I really want to see it happen. And you can't do a bubble either because these kids have to be in school learning. I mean, they could resort to online while at a bubble, but I think that'll definitely be a distraction to them, kind of being in one area. So I'm hoping that we could kind of see no fans maybe, and then just have the games televised and just root
Hmm.
from home, which basketball is basketball to me. So as long as I can see it somehow and somewhere, I would be pretty
Yes.
happy.
Yes, I agree.
So sticking with college basketball, Wichita State had one of the greatest seasons in NCAA history, going 35-0 in the regular season. What was that season like for Wichita State and impact that it had on the coming years?
It's been insane. First of all, I'm so mad that I'm just a few years younger than the whole Ron Baker and Fred VanVleet
Yeah.
era. I actually
Hmm.
came to college and became a sports reporter in 2016, which
Hmm.
was the first season without them. So that was
Oh,
sad. But no, that was just, it was huge for Wichita. I mean, Wichita not having any major league teams, Wichita State basketball has always been the thing. But
mhm.
ever since then, it's been even more just escalated and blown up, and people are proud of Wichita. It really put Wichita on the map for a lot of
I
people.
agree. Hmm.
And but in the city, it's just like they became celebrities, and that's even carried over even to now. Even though our team hasn't been as good, they still have that level of respect and just stardom from all of the fans because of that one season. So it's definitely had the biggest effect ever. It's brought people to our school, our university. I have
Right.
two of my best friends that were in the sports management program with me. They're from California, and one of them told me one time that he didn't know of Wichita State until they were playing in the NCAA tournament. And then when they looked up our school, they found out that we had one of the best sports management programs. And so that's why he's here. But he wouldn't have known about that if the
Right.
team didn't do as good. So it really changed the way that people see our school and our program, and definitely our players, because even now our players are like celebrities here.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was one of those people who didn't know about Wichita State before this immaculate run that they had in their regular season. But unfortunately, that kind of like stopped and ended. I don't want to,
Yeah.
hurt any of your feelings here, but that Fred Van Vliet shot against Kentucky that was missed, like, what was that moment like, do you feel like on campus, since you came after that shot, what was it like kind of going there knowing like what happened, that you guys probably could have had one of the greatest runs in history?
Yeah, so actually, Kentucky now has just always left a bad taste in our mouths, and we
Hmm.
actually played them in the second round of the NCAA tournament my first year here. And so I was actually at the game against Kentucky round two. And we also had a heartbreaking loss to them. Landry Shamet had the ball and he shot it, I think it was Landry, and missed. And that was actually one of the first losses that I've covered as a student reporter, because that year we had a couple losses, but on the road I wasn't there for. Undefeated at home, and I'm pretty sure we went undefeated in our conference because we were in
Hmm.
the Missouri Valley. So I really didn't have to cover any losses like that, and so that was very, very sad. I was like, that was probably like the craziest moment, because I'm like, of course it had to be to Kentucky. It could have been any other school. So
Right.
they definitely left a bad taste in everyone's mouths. And then they did it again after they beat us in the NCAA tournament. That was what, 2017? So yeah, that wasn't fun. And I wasn't really a fan of the players when we went in the locker room to interview them. So, and maybe it was because I had bias because of what happened with Fred VanVleet,
Hmm.
but that wasn't fun.
I think Kentucky really, if you look at like the schools in college basketball, probably one of like the most hated teams out there, I think. At least I don't like
Yeah.
Kentucky at all. So,
Yeah, well, something that got on my nerves about them is that they pretended to not know who Landry Shamet was, and like he was like the talk of the town, especially like the night
mhm,
before he had a huge game, and like they just showed a lot of arrogance and ignorance by saying,
mhm,
"Oh, like I don't know who that is. I'm not worried about them." Whereas people like Trey Young, when he was with OU, even though they blew us out that game when Trey Young played
right.
us, but something that I've realized with him, and I've always said he's actually a very respectful person, is he, in the press conference, named all of our players by name, even like
Oh,
the
wow.
bench players that got in the game. he was naming them by names, and so I just feel like it's a difference in culture. I mean, to
Hmm.
act like the tough guy and say, "Oh, I'm too good for these people. I don't know who any of your players are." Like it just like really you watch film and you know
Right.
exactly who that is. So it yeah, that was not fun.
I'd be in the same boat as you. I mean, if I was in that situation, I would definitely feel that way as well, especially if it's like players that you cover and that you've grown to kind of have a connection with because of
Mhm.
what you've done at the school. So I definitely understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
So, like covering a loss like that, what was kind of like the mood for like you asking questions? Because sometimes, after a win, you're upbeat. Players feel good. You feel good after a win, but after a loss like that, especially in NCAA tournament, what like did you kind of have to like change your mood for kind of asking the
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, so it's funny that you bring that up because I actually credit that moment
Hmm.
into kind of the reporter. I mean, my style of reporting is very it's not always lighthearted because I do talk about very important issues
Hmm.
and I can be very serious, but I also have always tried to be the bridge between the athlete and the fan. And, I've been very close with the athletes and I want them to see me as someone that they can go to, and I want the fans to see me as someone that they can go to. And I kind of bridge that. And so here I am after the biggest loss, like a heartbreaking loss. Our season's over, and I haven't
Hmm.
covered a loss yet. And I asked my boss, I said, what do I even ask them? And let's just say all he told me was anything and everything. So I was like, okay, like that. I'm a freshman reporter with never
Hmm.
covering a loss. Do you have any other advice? But anyway, so I was left on my own to figure out what I wanted to ask them. And I'm like, you know what? I wasn't really um, assigned to anything. Like, no one told me to go get this quote or go get that quote. So I had to come up with something on the fly. And I'm like, okay, these guys don't want to be interviewed. They really don't. And people are like going to put it all back on them and, blame them for so much. And so I was like, what would they want to answer? They don't want to answer anything, but what would lessen the blow? So I actually came up and I did this segment every year after. But I said, "What's one thing that you'd want to say to the fans that have supported you all year?" And um, so I asked all the players that, and that's actually something that they weren't really like mad to answer that. They were able to kind of loosen up and really, instead of being mad, they were able to switch that to being very appreciative because they were thinking about the fans and how supportive they've been. So I was able to get some very raw and genuine answers out of them that they wanted to answer. And I made a whole video, a message to the fans, and I've done it after the end of every season. Didn't
Hmm.
really get to do it this season, obviously, because of the circumstances.
Right.
But I think that has just been kind of the turning point of knowing what I kind of want my reporting style to be, because then everyone loved it and it went viral, not viral, but like Wichita viral. So
Okay. And that's
yeah,
great. I mean, especially getting the fan and the athlete kind of like conjoined like one really
yeah,
as it's beneficial for both sides and for you as well as being the reporter because then they're going to continue to come back to you like you said.
definitely.
Well, Aaliyah, I don't have any more questions for you unless you have anything else to say, any final remarks.
Not really. I think you did a
Okay.
great job asking the
Okay.
questions. I feel like
Thank
I
you.
talk a lot. So hopefully the people listening learned something from my rambling.
I'm sure they did because I know I learned something from you just asking you questions and from talking to you. So I want to thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
You too.